us about what exactly the EU is looking at here.
Yeah, so they said it's still very early days, but they said, of particular concern is whether they're looking at Amazon's dual role both as a platform and a merchant in its own right. So the question is whether they might have access to data or information about customers and sales as their role as a platform that could give them an advantage as a merchant and better competing with those competitors.
Now, EU antitrust regulators have looked at Amazon before. What did they look at previously, and what did they find?
Yeah, so they have looked at Amazon in the past, but the company was able to escape relatively unscathed. In 2016, the company escaped being fined by settling on an investigation into their ebook service. And then last year, they were also ordered by the EU to pay back 250 million euros in allegedly unpaid taxes. But that, is a drop in the bucket compared to what the EU asked Apple to pay back, which was 13 billion euros.
You mentioned Apple, and of course, we've also talked about Alphabet. The EU has been very aggressive in pursuing big tech. What is the likelihood that this does result in a formal probe?
Yeah. I mean, the EU has, I think it's fair to say, is the most aggressive regulator when it comes to regulating big tech. I mean, Silicon Valley is getting used to, or getting to know the EU antitrust chief, Margrethe Vestager, quite well. The most recent example of one of their decisions was in July when they fined Google a €1 billion fine for the second record fine in less than a year. So, there are questions that this is just the beginning for Amazon, and they could, in fact, be next.
Walk us through the timeline here. When will we know more?
So, as I said, it's still a preliminary probe. So they're just in the process of asking questions at the moment. So they sent out questionnaires to other companies and retailers to kind of gather more information. And then if they see deeper concerns, then they might open what's called, a formal probe. And that is, that's when it would kind of pick up at a faster pace. But these investigations do take a long time. I mean, they can take years. As Google knows, this has been going on for almost 10 years since they started the preliminary probe into Google over its behavior. So it can take a long time, but the signs are definitely pointing in that direction. So
now, interestingly, Amazon is one of the companies that President Trump has attacked. Clearly, has his eye on it. We have this question about whether this will result or lead to some kind of antitrust suit here in the United States. I mean, how much have the steps in Europe really impacted the steps that we're seeing being taken by regulators in the rest of the world when it comes to big tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the EU has played a significant role in influencing other jurisdictions around the world in terms of regulating big tech. I mean, I would say that there is a difference in the EU versus the US. The EU can move a lot quicker with these antitrust investigations versus the US, and that's partly because of the way the system is set up. The EU can take these unilateral decisions, whereas in the US, authorities have to prove their court and case. They have to prove their case in court first before they can move ahead. So while there has been a lot of debate in the U.S. as well about the role of Amazon and Google and Facebook as well, it could take even longer before we see significant action there.
Now, say this does progress, is a fine the ultimate punishment, or is it actually changing business practices?
Yeah, so, in an antitrust investigation, the EU has the power to fine companies as much as 10% of its annual revenue. And, I mean, Google in Google's case, for instance, that actually does amount to quite a lot. But more significantly for these companies, the EU regulators usually ask them to, or order them, I should say, to change their behavior. And this move to open an initial probe into Amazon's behavior really suggests that the EU is taking issue with platforms and the way they treat other rivals that operate on those platforms. So that is a bit of a shift, and and we've seen in the Google case that they're starting to ask platforms to treat those other competitors equally, despite the fact that those competitors are using the platforms to extend their own reach.